interesting parliamentary debate and decision.
It's already in the parliament.
Parliament? Something that already passed the parliament, but not yet the House of Lords. And it's not certain that it's going to pass the House of Lords. And the idea is that that there are some women. That's a little bit of background. I have in my kehillah somebody by the name of Professor Josh Adel. Professor Adel is literally one of the leading experts in genetics in the world. He's a professor at Imperial College. He's literally one of the big experts, and a little bit of this discussion is a reflection of my discussions with him. So these days, we're able to manipulate the gene sequence, the genes that exist in people's body, in the middle of the cell, okay? In a number of different ways. What's relevant to us is the following question. There's some people who suffer from mitochondrial diseases. Some women who suffer from
What are
let me start from the beginning. Okay, let me explain what a cell is. Okay, let's go mamish from the very beginning, from the very basics. Okay, before we get to the halacha, let's look at some of the real basics involved. Okay, so we begin over here, and this is a basic view of what a cell looks like. What happens here?
Is that what you call a betza, or this is in the betza?
No, this is
cells?
well. This is no. Before the betza is one type of cell. It's a kind of cell. It's different to other cells, but it's essentially a kind of cell.
Yeah.
Every cell is a little bit different, but most of them share some basic similarities.
Yeah.
The most basic similarity is that you have a cell. It looks like this. This is just an example. It's not. You have the cell with a membrane around the cell. Within the what's called the cytoplasm, which is the essential large part of the cell, you have various different bodies that do various different functions. And then in the middle you have the nucleus. In the nucleus of the cell, you have the DNA. Okay? And this is called, the DNA from the nucleus is called the nuclear DNA. That's what it's referred to, and it's important to know that term. So that's what you end up with. You have the nuclear DNA, and then there is, in fact, additional DNA that exists in various bodies in the cytoplasm. Okay, is that simple enough? We have that so far? Okay.
Back to high school.
Back to high school. But look, one of the important things to know is that in order to paskin a shaila, you first have to know the mitzias. You have to know the mitzias, the reality really, really well in order to be able to paskin it correctly, to have a serious understanding. So, what happened here? This was working well before.
Back
Okay.
and then
Cancel. Okay, fine. Okay, so that's the first cell. That's called the cytoplasm. Then over here you have a little bit more of a complex understanding of this cell. Okay, again, essentially the same kind of a cell, but it gives you an insight that it's not just a blob of, it's mostly water, the cytoplasm, but it's not just a blob, it has the googlies, and it has the mitochondria, and it has the ribosomes, and even the nucleus is much more complex. It has the external area, and then in the middle of the nucleus, or part near the middle of the nucleus, you have the development of the DNA. Okay, so it's a little bit more complex than the simple picture people have said before. Let's move on to over here. You have it spelled out, the same thing, but spelled out with a little bit more understanding of the various different bits and pieces that are here. Most specifically, what's relevant to our discussion is the idea of the nucleus, which is this pink area in the middle.
Sorry,
No problem. You have this pink area in the middle, which is the nucleus. Then in the middle of the nucleus, you have what they call the nucleolus, which is the center of it, in which the DNA is found. And then on the outside, you have mitochondria.
Yeah.
Okay, you have these things called mitochondria.
Dus voor producing energie.
Pardon?
Dat-
Well,
voor de
they
energie
do.
met-
That's what they said in the media, that they're like the battery packs, but it's a little bit more complex than that as well. Now over here you can see this exact same structure, but you can see it a little bit in 3 dimensions. Before we only saw it in 2 dimensions, but the cell is in fact 3-dimensional. It's a round object. It's larger than, it's not necessarily round. Different cells have different sizes in different ways. So nerve cells are very long, single cell bodies, can be very long and in different shapes. But to understand it, this is the way they present it. But this, you see the exact same thing in a 3-dimensional kind of form with a little bit more of the complexity that you have over here. You see the mitochondria, and then you have various vacuoles, which are simply things that hold fatty acids, and then you have the various other bits and pieces, the googly, that are found there, and we can see it in even right now. What goes on? As technology develops, you can see with ever more refined detail what's happening in a cell. Once upon a time, all they could really see was that first picture we had.
Yeah.
It's all they could really see. Now that we can see better, we can actually get it more defined. And then we see better, we see each of those little bits are actually something more, until we get to something like this, which is a fairly complex picture of the cell that you eventually end up with of the details of the cell. Okay? So that's where we begin. Now, what happens? Okay. Now, this is simply to show you that those were diagrams. This is an actual picture of what the cell looks like. This is a picture of the cell. And you can see that in the cell that you have over here, you have the nucleus, and in the cell itself, you have the various bits and pieces, including the mitochondria, which is what they are speaking about. Okay, so this is, again, it's important to understand the picture that you have of what a cell looks like. Okay. Then over here is just another picture that I made of the various different parts of a cell, where you can see the cells, and each one is a little bit of a different shape, but you can also see the nucleus in the middle of the cell. And it's important to note that the nucleus is a tiny drop compared to the rest of the cell. The cell itself is much larger than what the nucleus is.
Yeah.
And that's relevant to the halachas that we're going to see in a few minutes. Okay? Then we'll take it from there. And over here is a picture of an ovum, a beitza, the egg of a woman, where once again you have the exact picture. This gives us this picture, which allows us to see the nucleus and allows us to see some of the external structure. It doesn't allow us to see inside, but while there are things in the cell that create that structure, specifically the ovum is essentially round. It has actually dendrites, it has actually things that exist on the outside of the ovum, but essentially the ovum is a very round cell. I think that's okay. Over here you have a little bit more of a picture of what it looks like. Once again, you have the round bit. Now, it doesn't spell out, and I spent a little bit of time trying to search for a proper picture or a proper map of the ovum that describes exactly what is in the cytoplasm of the ovum, but nobody seemed to have that. But there is mitochondria and there are Golgi bodies in it, just like in every other cell, and there are structures to hold it together, and there are various ribosomes. there's an entire structure. What's this different from a regular cell? The major difference between this and a regular cell is that in the middle of the nucleus where the DNA is, normally you have 2 strands of DNA. But the egg has 1 strand of DNA.
One what?
1 strand of DNA. One strand of DNA in the egg. And then what happens is the sperm comes with its other strand of DNA and fertilizes the egg and goes in, and the strand of DNA essentially, the sperm manages to penetrate the membrane on the outside, and it goes in and it merges its single strand of DNA with the single strand of DNA that is found in the nucleus of the egg. And once it has those 2 strands of DNA, so then what can happen is then it can begin to divide, the cell can begin to divide, and fairly quickly it divides over the course of the next several days until you have what's called a zygote. A zygote is the pre-embryo. Before you have the uber, before you have the embryo, you have a group of cells, bunch of cells. That's the basic science that we need to know, relevant for our shaila. So, going back to an earlier picture of DNA, an earlier picture of a cell. So, as you can see, there are different parts of what's called the cytoplasm. And in there is something called the mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria are a body for themselves. They are, in the main, an entity from themselves. According to evolutionary theory, the 2 of them developed separately. You have the eukaryotic cells, you have the normal cells that developed with their fairly complex nuclear DNA that eventually enveloped this other kind of a cell, which ended up being the ribosome within the cell. So from the perspective of science today, they look at it as very much 2 different entities.
But what would be its function on itself, if not that it's...
Well, now, you're right. There becomes what's called a symbiotic relationship.
That supposedly it was 2 separate things, so what was wonderful?
Well, one was... That's difficult to know because they are well integrated today, and that's important. But the important part is because it existed on its own, it has its own set of DNA within the cell.
Okay.
It has its own miniature DNA.
So it has a double DNA, or it has this like
It has a single DNA strand.
Also.
Maybe it's double. I really don't know the answer. I'm not sure, but it has its own identifiable DNA within itself that stands independent of the DNA that is found in the nucleus of the entire cell.
I always thought that in the body, in one person, the DNA is the same around the cell, but that's not true.
So that's exactly the point. That actually what they've discovered is it's not just 1 strand of DNA.
It's a different...
And the ribosomes, and the mitochondria have their own individual 37 genes that define how it behaves and what it does.
And not necessarily the same code as the other parts of the body?
Similar chemical structures, but it creates their own proteins that allow it to actually manipulate glucose and allows it to provide energy to the rest of the cell.
So theoretically, a person with some kind of disability or whatever could still have good children because that part is okay, and vice versa.
Well, okay, so let's talk through exactly what happens. Okay, now You can have people who have a genetic problem. It's not, there's only the nuclear DNA, there's over 20,000 pairs of DNA in the genetic code. In the mitochondria, there are only 37 genes. Okay, so the mitochondria is very, very fixed and limited and only does a specific thing, while the nuclear DNA is what in the main seems to identify all the details that we have. And when a person has a genetic disease, le'aleinu, so usually it'll be a problem in the nuclear DNA. However, there are certain diseases that are called mitochondrial diseases, where the genetic component of the nuclear DNA is fine, but the genetic component of the mitochondria is problematic. Now, one additional factor we have to go back and remember from what we discussed a few moments ago is that, as I explained, the man's sperm, the zera, does one thing. It goes in and combines in the nucleus or near the nucleus, combines the two with the strand of DNA that is found in the egg.
And this is the 37, right?
Pardon? No.
This is not the 37 DNA type?
No, the 37 DNA is only in the mitochondria.
Okay.
The mitochondria are one of the small bodies that are found in the middle of the cell.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, we saw that before.
Yeah. Your code will be on the internet.
Better change it.
No, we don't see it. If you don't hold it.
Okay, you didn't see it. It depends. If it's stuck in there, I'll have to change it. That's stuck in that's good.
No, we don't see it.
Okay, so so if you can look over here in the cell, you have these little purple things. These little purple things are essentially the mitochondria, and they have 37 genes, while in the middle over there, there's 20,000 genes, okay? Okay, now, so when the egg is fertilized, so what happens is in the middle is where the man's sperm goes and the DNA combines. I mean, compared to an ovum, the zera is tiny. The ovum is many hundreds of times the size of the zera. Because all that the zera does is influence the DNA combination in the middle. But everything else about the ovum comes from the mother. So the mitochondria are inherited always just from the mother. Very rare circumstances differently, but essentially the mitochondria and the rest of everything in the cytoplasm is inherited only from the mother. So how do you resolve a situation where a person has what's known as mitochondrial disease? Now, mitochondrial disease reflects itself in lots of different things, in lots of different ways. Very often they can't figure out what it is, and so they end up with this problem. Okay, all kinds of different things associated with it. So how do they do it? So what they do is like this, and it's not what it says in the media. And it's really important to understand that the media have an agenda. And the media's agenda is to allow this research and to promote this research. So therefore what they say is, all we're doing is changing 37 genes. That's not in fact what happens. What in fact happens is like this.
Changing by doing what? You have to.
So this is what's really important. This is what's really important. And they don't actually, if you listen to the BBC and to the radio, they don't actually spell out in detail what it means. What they do is like this. They go to a lady who has a healthy, so the lady, the mother, we'll call her the mother. The mother is a healthy lady. Her problem is she carries in her ovaries the eggs that she has have a mutation. And that is that the mitochondria don't provide and do what they are supposed to. There's a mutation in those 37 genes. Okay? In those 37 genes, there's a problem which causes a problem in the mitochondria that she has. There's no way to rectify that, because that would mean finding all the mitochondria in the egg and replacing the entire cytoplasm, which is impossible. Technically impossible.
And taking them out that
So
way?
you can't take them out either. So what do? And what is this technique that's now developed? This technique is that they go into the egg, they go into the mother's egg, and they remove the nuclear DNA from the mother's egg, and then they take an egg from a donor, where the healthy donor's egg, the mitochondria and the cytoplasm is healthy. They remove the nuclear DNA from the donor egg, and they place in the donor egg the nuclear DNA from the mother.
It's the same combination of DNA, right?
Pardon?
I know. The new, they're actually. Let's say
new DNA,
after they install or they put the
DNA from the mother.
I mean, is the egg changed, or it's the same as it used to be before?
Well, so that's the point. So now you have the cytoplasm from the donor, together with the mitochondria and the rest of the egg from the donor, and the only thing that is changed is the nuclear DNA that is from the
is it the
mother.
same structure as it
It's
used to
the
be?
same structure,
The same
but the fact
characteristics. I mean, the same color of eyes, the same
as the mother,
as the real mother.
as the original, as the donor of the nuclear DNA.
As the donor.
No. Let's. I'm mixing things. Okay, let's make sure. We have a donor mother.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a different woman who has healthy eggs. Okay, we'll call her the donor.
Yeah.
Then you have the mother. The mother is the wife of the husband who is over here, who has a problem with her mitochondria.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can't fix her mitochondria. So what we do is we take her nuclear DNA, which essentially, in the main, identifies the characteristics of the person.
That's the 20,000, right?
That's the 20,000
This is
genes.
nuclear. This is
the nuclear DNA.
yeah.
Which is okay. Really.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We take it out of her egg, and we put it in the donor's egg. So that way we now have a complete egg. And this complete egg has the donor's cytoplasm
and the
and
nuclear
the mother's nuclear DNA.
What's the impact on how the child will look like?
The 37, the 37, yeah.
So one second. How the child will look like, in the main, will be the way the mother looks like.
The real mother.
The real mother.
The 20,000.
Or the mother of the 20,000 of the nuclear DNA. That provides the characteristics of who the person is.
And where does this happen? When
Okay.
they,
So the real mother, you mean the wife of the husband?
The wife, that's
The wife,
right.
yeah,
the wife.
the mother.
Now
The mother.
there are two different techniques involved over here.
So nog more, because that's important. You say that. Or I can ask differently. In what, besides that, there's a health effect or a effect that stops to have a healthy baby? Because I think that's what
That
you're
was the
talking about.
mitochondrial disease.
So what is the auftu? What is the effect? Because I don't understand
Because
exactly
now
of
you
taking in a donor.
Because now you don't have the mitochondria
faulty,
that is
yeah.
problematic.
Beside that,
And that's it.
And what is the mitochondria cause? Not the character. It should be understood
the
before.
37
health.
No,
This is,
the mitochondria, they
general.
say that it provides the energy to the cells.
energy.
It provides energy to the cells. That's essentially its role.
But it's not. But it's not the character of the baby.
It's not the character of the baby. The basic character of a person is made up from the nuclear DNA, rather than from the cytoplasm.
So instead of replacing the faulty mitochondria,
That's
they
right.
just take the right.
They're taking the nuclear
and installing
DNA and installing it in a donor egg.
Okay.
They then take this donor, this
And put
egg,
it back on the
and they put it back into the mother, or you can put it back in a surrogate.
Oh, I see.
You can do all kinds of things once. Now, there is a whole discussion of what is better to do. When's it better to fertilize the egg? Is it better to fertilize the egg? Okay, that's not relevant. That's technical. That's not immediately relevant.
Just to make sure, just so clear.
Yeah.
The 37, I would call them.
Yeah.
This is basically what we call the battery pack, the energy.
That's
And the
within
20,000 is the actual code which represents the mother. If I'm can say it so. And
That's what Simon says, understands to that.
right.
Okay.
And where do the mixing with the father? Does that happen by the mother?
Usually they'll mix in the father again in vitro in the test tube. It's two different shittas, two different opinions. But we'll take it that once they have created this new egg, which is a combination
In the lab, obviously.
in the lab. Once they've created this new egg, they then fertilize it with the husband's.
And then they put it by the mother.
And then they put it back into the
Once it's in
mother,
a certain
or it
process.
can go into surrogate. It can go wherever you
But
want.
the
with
energy
it.
is what moves later in life. Also the baby. That's
Well, it's everything. It does make sure the cells are able to live and move and generate appropriately and maintain that.
I have a question. The genetic diseases, where are they located?
Most genetic diseases are located in the nuclear DNA.
It's much more complex.
Pardon? Which is much more.
So it's not to solve
other genetic diseases. It's to solve
okay.
only this mitochondrial
I
disease.
What kind of
see,
disease?
okay.
Because it seems it's interesting that the 37, which seem less complex, we cannot change, but the 20,000 we can replace.
That's right, because they are one unit.
You can just take them out and replace.
And while the mitochondria, there are numerous
Many.
mitochondria
So,
It's a
in the
combination.
cytoplasm.
I'm very sorry, Rob, but
No problem.
that means that in the end, in order to get different mitochondria, I have to take the whole nucleus of the DNA of a donor, and that nucleus, I understand.
No, the other way around.
Forget. I take the nucleus of the mother, the nuclear DNA of the mother,
Yeah.
and I place it in a donor egg.
Yes, this is the.
Okay?
Now I
I'm
understand.
removing the nucleus. I take an egg from a donor, from a
Yeah.
lady outside.
Yeah.
I remove her nucleus.
Yes.
I place in the nucleus of
So
the
it was
mother.
verkehrt. That's why I didn't.
Okay, I
Yeah,
place
yeah.
in the nucleus of the mother, and now I have a whole egg with the nucleus of the mother, with the nuclear DNA of the mother, and the mitochondria and the cytoplasm of the donor.
And I have another. Sorry, I have another. It's maybe technical.
Okay.
What kind of problems I know we're exceeding? Okay, we said that it's the energy of the cell, etc. The dove or the seed.
Of the cells.
Yeah. So what? I mean, this not to solve genetic diseases. So what this maneuver is coming to
Because
solve?
it
Which
solves
problems?
the diseases that come when you have a mitochondrial illness.
For example,
For example, what? There are babies that are born that over the course of the first few months of life, they just don't get alive, they don't get movement, they live, but they don't get movement, and then slowly all their different parts of their body collapse. The heart stops functioning, the kidneys stop functioning. A certain weakness in the body because the mitochondria are not functioning properly. So slowly but surely the entire thing falls apart. And that's what happens. And it's and it's a well-documented disease. There's a few hundred documented every year. What is the chiddush over here? Why did the Parliament, UK Parliament, in most countries, this technique is banned?
So what's wrong with it actually?
That's exactly what I'm
if
also
you're coming
wondering.
to solve a problem
Okay.
and what's
So
bad?
let me explain to you. There always was a line in all kinds of discussions that exist and all the permitted research, that nobody is permitted to manipulate the DNA of a person.
There's a gentleman's agreement.
That's a it's more than it's a legal agreement. It's considered unethical to manipulate the DNA of a person, because otherwise, eventually, I'll be able to order exactly the baby I want. If I can manipulate the DNA, I want a blonde, blue-eyed baby with an IQ of 180. And if I'm able to understand the genes properly, that's exactly what I can eventually be able to get. So therefore, there's always been a policy to prohibit any manipulation of the genes within the structure.
So you could only take a live person that looks blonde with 180 IQ. This you can try.
That's
Watching
right.
is not going to help.
But what?
Because the 20,000 come from a...
Well, okay,
So
that's actually,
it would be possible to take this nucleus from the mother out of her egg and not put it in the egg of a donor, but give medicine to the nucleus, repair...
again, the nucleus
repair.
here is not the problem. The nucleus here is not the problem. The problem is
It's
the
something
cytoplasm.
in the
No,
it's the
cytoplasm.
other part of the
It's everything around the nucleus
Yeah.
that is the illness we're trying to
Exactly.
prevent.
So Luyetsui, we could take whatever you call it, repair it outside.
Repair the cytoplasm.
Yes, and put it back in the
But we
mother
can't-
without the donor.
not possible to do.
No, but that.
But we
not
can't do
now.
that.
It's not
Okay.
possible to do. What
You're
do we
right.
intend?
Eventually,
in 10 years,
eventually.
So then
But at the
there would
moment,
be.
we can't do that.
Then there would be.
That's a different child.
That's a different child.
It's a different child.
Yeah,
Looking
exactly.
at what they're doing today,
Yeah.
and the shaila of
Yeah.
what they're doing today and
Yeah.
how it works.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's all we're looking at. Okay. Now. Okay, so I hope I've explained the science a
yeah.
little bit.
You
Okay.
can go to be a teacher in biology.
Okay. Now, what's the
Okay.
practical implications? So, what's the halacha? Who is the mother in this case? Now, there's already been a lot of discussion about who is the mother in a case of surrogacy, of where you take an egg that is fertilized by the father, and you take it and put it in a second mother,
Just for
second
the pregnancy.
woman,
Just hold it for
just to
pregnancy.
hold it for the pregnancy. And there's a lot of discussion amongst poskim. How do you define who the mother is? Is the mother defined by the genetic mother who provided the egg?
The 20,000.
Or it's more than the 20,000. She provides the whole egg.
But that's a healthy, normal case.
One second, before we get into our case, there's the question in halacha discussion about surrogacy, where one woman, let's say her womb cannot hold a baby properly. So what she does is she takes her egg, and it gets fertilized by the husband, and then gets placed in the womb of somebody else, of a second woman. And the second woman is pregnant and carries the baby. Now, what identifies a mother? The genetic source or the person from whom the egg came from, that's one possibility. Or is the mother the one who actually carried the baby for 9 months and gives birth to the baby at the end of it?
You would say that carrying a baby, or the 37 that's from the healthy mother, from a healthy...
No, 37.
No,
I'm
no,
speaking
no,
about
yeah,
in the
there's
case of
nothing.
normal surrogacy.
No, what I'm saying...
Well, before we get to
No, what
the...
I'm saying is they have the same attribute. They just provide energy, if you will, or
Well,
strength. They don't have actual...
Well, could be. It's interesting what you say.
But when you
Could
say
be, but
this
let's only
so-called
look at
carrier
surrogacy.
mother,
Surrogate.
she doesn't
She's
add
called the
anything.
surrogate.
The what?
Surrogate.
The surrogate, okay, the surrogate. Does the surrogate, besides letting her body function as the one where the baby grows, does she add anything
Well,
to the baby?
the baby grows within her, and there's a whole debate. And again,
For
among
instance,
the-
it says, I think if a pregnant woman sees certain things or eats certain things, that it
So it affects the baby.
That affects
Absolutely.
the baby.
Absolutely.
So that means that the surrogate in this
Has
case
an impact.
has an impact,
Huge impact
on the baby.
Absolutely. If the surrogate smokes or drinks alcohol,
Yeah,
it could have tremendous impact on the baby.
exactly.
And most surrogacy agreements, in other words, there are literally
Contracts.
thousands of these things that take
Contracts,
place.
yeah.
Because women don't want to be pregnant because it'll make them look bad for a
Yeah,
while.
yeah, whatever.
All kinds of different ways. And sometimes some women can't. Some women can't. There are all kinds of ways. So there are serious agreements that are put into place where the surrogate mother undertakes not to behave in a way that would be detrimental to the fetus.
Yeah, exactly.
A whole collection
I was sorry, what?
One second. So the question in halacha, a lot of discussion of what creates the sense of motherhood. Does the beitzah, the egg, define who is the mother? Does the pregnancy define who the mother is? Does the birth, the one who gives birth, the actual act of giving birth, does that define who the mother is? And there is much, much discussion in Poskim about this already. And essentially the consensus is, originally Rav Elyashiv said to Rabbi Avram Steinberg and Ishmas Avram, to Avram, Abraham, whatever his name is, told him in Ishmas Avram, originally he said that it goes after the birth. Later on, it seems that Rav Elyashiv changed his mind and said that it follows the genetic, the mother follows the one who gave the egg.
But the birth, I mean, even a lady that doesn't give birth in a normal way, cesarean is also
Cesarean,
called
okay. So there could be it could be cesarean is also a kind of labor, a style of labor. Different ways.
This qualifies for certain things.
Different ways. Essentially, you end up with four different answers in Allah. There's a Moshe Sternbuch who says that this child doesn't have a real mother at all. Neither of them are the
They need a
full mother.
complete set of everything to
You
have a
need,
mother.
in order to be a mother.
But some say you have two mothers.
That's it.
And this is-
Moshe Feinstein seems to imply that you have two mothers. And then there's the
But
possibility.
what is it? Two mothers means say
Two mothers
Kaddish for
means
two
like
people.
this. Say Kaddish for two people. Two mothers implies sisters from either mother are usher to you.
Okay.
Yeah, sisters from either mother or mothers' mothers or however you do
But
it.
then it turns the husband as bigamist.
Well, does it turn... Is that a bigamist? But
I mean,
he didn't do a prohibited...
No, it does not.
He didn't do a prohibited act of
No, he didn't do
intercourse.
the actual act.
He didn't do any actual act. That doesn't make him a
Okay,
bigamist,
it
but
just
it's cute.
complicates
It's
more.
cute, but it doesn't. Okay, so you have all these two different, these two very, very different.
And if they're
Answers.
related, the two mothers, is this a problem? I mean, halachically.
So if the two are related, it's really it's less of it's actually in some ways less, some ways more. Sure, I don't want to go through with it. I don't want to go. I don't want to look at surrogacy so much. I want to look at a tshuva that we have about our question. Over here. Okay, just want to explain that in surrogacy, it's what do we say la halacha? Practically everybody agrees that this child is an absolute suffix. So let me give you an example. If let's say one of the mothers is not Jewish, this child needs to have gir l'chumra. It's considered a ger.
1 second, this gets quite practical to get someone out of
In
mamzeros.
surrogacy.
To get them out of mamzeros, maybe. Is it not
You're
practical?
absolutely right, but we're not going to go down there as
No,
well.
that's
Okay, okay. There's lots of shadows that
That's
come
pretty
out of it.
practical.
Take the simple side.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so in surrogacy, la halacha, it seems the consensus view is, and it seems the consensus has shifted, I would say. Originally, people were unsure and they said they were a suffix. Then many considered the possibility of the surrogate, the mother who carried the baby, to be the real mother. But now it's mostly accepted that it's the mother is the one who gives the egg. But nevertheless, la halacha, we consider it a suffix. And if one of them is not Jewish, so then the child needs ger l'chumra. By way of example, the child is considered a ger for all other implications that are associated with that, and also if the two mothers were both Jewish, so she would be usher on both the families, totally and completely. Okay. So what's the situation over here? Over here too, you have like two mothers. You have one who's providing the cytoplasm, and the other one who's providing the nuclear DNA.
But she returns back, she gives birth to the
And
original
it
mother.
could be that she gives birth herself, or she puts it in a
Then
surrogate.
there's
Then
three.
you have three mothers, which is why I said this year is about three mothers and a baby. Okay, you can have three mothers and a baby. That's why. Okay, that's what you can end up with. So Rabbi Asher Weiss, it's a very serious and great Talmud Chacham, and a serious Paisik, a very serious person. So he has one of the earliest tshuvas about this question. And he goes through and he understands that you're using a donor egg. However, he goes ahead and he says that it's considered like a klipa. The klipa, the covering, the shell, has a problem, and everything is the nuclear DNA. And over here we're speaking about 20,000 pairs of nuclear DNA compared to 37. So you follow the Rav. And the real mother is the one who gives the nuclear DNA.
So he says it's like from the 20,000 you would replace, let's say...
You're not replacing any.
No.
You're not replacing any.
No,
That's
I
the
understand.
really important thing.
No, the problem is not with the
understand.
nuclear.
I understand.
No, so
But he
you
says,
can
since
don't
this is a
prepare-
clip, but this is also a minority of minority, and there's 20,000 that,
Yeah,
that
except-
it's overruled basically.
Except, so he goes according to the majority.
Right,
But that's he's going according to the Rav of the DNA, of the nuclear DNA, compared to the 37 DNA in the mitochondria. The problem is that the Rav of the mass that we're speaking about is actually in the cytoplasm. He goes ahead and he is
Chashivus.
memayit. Well, it seems that he's going according to Chashivus, but he mitigates and he refers to it simply as a klipa.
So
the
37
cyto-
versus 20,000.
So he says 37 versus 20,000. 20,000 wins.
But the 37 is bigger or stronger than
Well,
in terms of...
well, I don't know if it's bigger or stronger, but it's different.
It's not the same type.
It's not the same. You're not comparing. You can't.
Apples
If
and
I
pears.
actually change 37 genes in the 20,000, so then I'll go basarayv. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm changing the entire
It's a different kind.
cytoplasm, and I'm putting in a new nuclear DNA. To my limited understanding, that doesn't define who the mother is, especially as follows. And again, we know that there are at least 100 genes in the nuclear DNA that interact with the mitochondria. And we have absolutely no real understanding about how many of the rest of those 20,000 genes interact with the rest of the cytoplasm.
Right, but if I may, I don't know, maybe it's my weird comment.
Yeah.
When we look at raw and not raw, it doesn't have to be that it's exactly the same thing. Meaning, we take milk and meat, it's two different kind of textures or things. Yet we still say that milk is, let's say, less than 6 years or whatever. So it doesn't have to be the
In
exact
one
same.
mixture. If you
Doesn't
could
have to be the
still,
exact same.
in one mixture, if you could separate them out, it doesn't become bottle.
I'm sure you take it to a lab, you can separate it.
You can't. No.
You can separate both of the whole of it. If someone has the funds for it, he cannot go to a lab and completely dissect it.
No. It becomes a mixture. It becomes chaticha achas,
Right, but they can-
chaticha nasis nevela. The answer is no. That's the mixture. In the normal process.
Normal,
Normal processes to a certain extent are different than what you're speaking about. So I'm not sure, I'm not sure that Rav Weiss is 100% correct. That over here you simply go after the Rav of what the majority of the DNA, because as I showed you, the bulk is actually from the donor mother, not from the. Now you're right that the expression of the nuclear DNA is mostly going to reflect the mother rather than the donor.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And that's the reality. That's the mitzias. However, it's built on a certain arrogance and believing that we understand the complexity of this cell fully and completely, and we don't. And most people, what bothers me a lot is the way in the media, even scientists have spoken about this and shown this in ways that are basically not true. It's not just replacing 37 genes from 20,000. It's replacing the entire cell, and you're putting in the nuclear DNA from another source. I don't know what the answer is.
I personally feel, with that I like the whole discussion from the table, sorry, I feel that, like, for instance, by Esrog, it says you have only psulim nirlenai. We are not supposed to look to an Esrog with a microscope. If we would discover many psulim perhaps.
Say this to Rav Falk about
No, wait a minute. No. You may afterwards know to make sure that you... Okay, I'm not a poisek, but I always feel that exactly what the Rov says. We're talking here about Chidushim, which are not... We have seen Chidushim in the past, which were later, they were Mavato, the scientists. They've come... It's not that they are sure.
My father wasn't sure I should say this. But I will, because I think it's right. I think that it's actually built on evolutionary theory. Because they're so sure that the mitochondria were independent entities once upon a time, and therefore it's possible to separate it out fully and totally, and it won't get mixed. We who believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the person,
it was instilled this way.
It was, this is part of an entire entity. Once upon a time, they thought that tonsils were what they called vestigial organs left over through the course of evolution, and then they had the appendix, which was various parts. And absolutely, there's nothing extra. There are no bits that aren't part of the complexity of a person. That you can't build on a theory of evolution medical realities. And because of the gaiva, because of the arrogance of scientists over the years, many people have gotten ill because they thought they knew what they're doing and they don't. I have a serious limited belief in the value of this process because there's too much uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, even in halacha, that's what I'm saying, even in halacha, I'm not sure that you can compare the majority of DNA over here to the minority over here, because we're discussing about changing the entire cytoplasm, and we have no real understanding of how it actually works together. There are huge interactions, but we don't know the details.
Don't say by mixed religions by food, that if we don't, of course, if there wouldn't be the 37 that are fixed, the person might have looked physically the same, but would be weaker, or the whole...
Yeah.
So
so you have a benefit, and without doubt, we don't know. Nobody's ever done it, so nobody has any idea what'll happen when you raise this child, and what's actually going to happen. They do now believe that mitochondria have an influence on aging. There are lots of other places that mitochondria actually have an influence.
And is it not, from what I understand, from what the criteria is for deciding who the mother is, let's say in the two-mother case, but not the surrogate mother, but that they just take an egg and put it back, so the original mother has her original 20,000, the real mother has her 20,000, and also she's physically giving birth to the...
So that's a standard IVF. The standard
then
IVF.
It's the real mother.
The real mother. There's no shadless.
Although she has something from the...
Why?
No.
One second. In standard IVF,
you say clear your question.
Meaning, when we take the eggs and we put her 20,000 into this
donor,
healthy donor, and then we
put it back into the mother.
Right.
So I don't know who the mother is.
There you are.
And that's the simple case.
That's in that simple case because the donor gives the majority of the egg itself. even though it's not the majority of
It's
the
not the
DNA,
code, but it's the majority.
but it's the majority of the egg itself comes from the donor. And we have no idea of the interaction, the actual interaction.
And,
of what
and
that
is that
means.
the standard way when people cannot have children?
But this is a brand new technique.
Oh, it's a brand new,
This
okay.
is a brand new technique.
So you basically want to ask the Dayunim before you get some healthy donor, before you have mamzerim or something, or
Well, I don't know. I'm not paskening. I'm just
No, I'm
simply.
just saying. No, if the other
But
one
is it when I know this about Pascaling, but is it not that in the past, Chazal, when they were in very uncertain situations like here, that only for that reason they said we don't want to go into it, or we go to Chumrah, or Eine Dover Sof, or we don't see the Sof.
Usually what we find in Chazal is they say it's a suffix. We remain with the suffix. To use the language of Rav Weiss, it's very, very beautiful language, that he speaks about how these questions are beyond our ken, are really, really difficult. And in these questions, we would need to have G'dolei HaRishonim, like the Ramban and the Rajba. We would need somebody of that kind of stature to decide it for us. Very beautiful.
We have seen that what is electricity, or what's today microwave. We have seen many modern things when present, or in the last 100 years, where the leading Gedolim had to paskin.
It's as if electricity is very difficult to understand.
Exactly.
Lemaisa, to quote a friend of mine, it's as if a baskol came out of Shemayim and told us electricity is osir.
Yeah.
But that's it. Okay.
Exactly.
I can give you lots of explanations why electricity should be mutter.
But is it not? But is there not another problem? Is there not another problem? Because
but one second, let me make it clear. Even though I can give all those explanations, it's usher.
Oh no, we took the first part.
No. Is it not?
It's too late. Yeah.
But is it not that Lemaise, leider, unfortunately, we see in the Goyische world that they are not going so deep into Luyutsui. It would be clear, as the Rav said, or Luyutsui, we could say this. Exactly, this one would be mutter, but all the others would be also. The Goyische world goes as low. Look, once it's a hatter, they do everything. I see this. I'm of Dutch origin, and I see the discussions which there are about many cases already in Holland about certain euthanasia cases where they killed somebody because they want to stretch it out. The doctors, there are certain people fighting.
Today they make things that's easier for them that change it
all over the world. This is a problem that they kill people.
But the question with this new technique that we said, always a surrogate mother.
No, it doesn't have with a surrogate
mother.
It's different. It's different.
But for example, so you cannot use a married lady for this. It becomes like it's just or stuff like problem like that.
No.
Why is that not a problem?
Because there is no ma'aseh, there is no active intercourse of anything that's usher.
Would it turn her not basula? Also not. That would not change either. Nothing doesn't affect the lady's status. And being related, something that's, let's say, an acidic relation that makes like two ladies are related, stuff like that.
That could be. That could be. Okay, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very interesting.